Hey everyone, it's the Koopa Man. Critics. Everyone is one according to the old maxim. But what does it mean to be a critic? Well, obviously it means to be critical of something. Be that a movie, a book, a series, even a meal. Opinions are like assholes. Everyone has them, and most of them are full of shit. But the thing about critics in this day and age is it seems to be more of a dodge for people to just mindlessly hate on things they never had any interest in anyway. Now before anyone gets uppity, let me lay my cards on the table. The Star Wars sequel trilogy sucked. So did Last of Us Part 2, so did The Legend of Korra, etc, etc. This is not going to be a fanboy video response defending a particular sacred cow that I happen to like. This is more of a general call out of critic culture, to use the phrase Tracer came up with in my very first video. But today we're going to go a little bit deeper. Instead of just calling today's critics a bunch of A-loggers and haters who like picking on things they never had interest in to begin with, looking at you, Eagle Raptor, we are going to discuss how being a critic does not necessarily make you a better writer or creator. After all, those who can't do teach, and those who can't teach bitch about it anonymously on the internet. So what is criticism? Well, in theory, criticism is an analysis of one's mistakes or flaws in order to improve oneself. Nothing is perfect after all, and all things fall short in sight of the glory of God. But the thing about criticism is it has to be constructive, otherwise it's of no use. There is a difference between criticism and blind hatred and nitpicking for flaws, or as the internet calls it, A-logging. In this day and age, especially post-Channel Awesome and its consequences, which have been a disaster for criticism kind, criticism has been perceived on both sides to be a shield and a dodge for those who only want to A-log. The culture war is a huge example of this. You need not dig very far before you find a certain gypsy culture warrior using Google Translate to call out a developer of the Silent Hill 2 remake and call them a bad person who isn't as good as the original dev team, without realizing the person he was contacting was on the original dev team as well. All over a certain character not having anime waifu appeal in a series he's not even remotely familiar with. It's examples like that that exposes grifters and A-loggers for what they are, yet in this day and age nobody knows the difference between criticism and A-logging and treats both as legitimate. In the culture war sphere, this is due to V being, quote, on our side and, quote, not as bad as the SJWs. So because of a shared ideology, he gets a blind pass, with the irony of the SJWs using this to defend criticisms against their sacred cows like Zoe Quinn and Anita. It's never even processed. But this isn't about how the culture warriors are getting to be just as bad as the social justice warriors and are slowly and blindly becoming their equal and opposite. I already made that video several times over. But let's humor V's ultimate point, that the characters in Silent Hill 2 Remake aren't sexy enough. What kind of game is Silent Hill 2? Well, Silent Hill 2 is a psychological horror starring James Sunderland, a man who is drawn to the mysterious town of Silent Hill after the death of his wife Mary by a mysterious letter sent by her to meet her there, and is tormented by the physical manifestations of his guilt and trauma, including very sexual and very sexually violent thoughts he may have had surrounding the ordeal, to the point that one of the monsters has, forceful relations with another one partway through the game. Even more so that the character in question, who is the main target of the culture war A-logging, is a character who was written to be a sexual abuse victim. Yeah, you can see why turning her into a generic anime waifu with big jugs jumping around in a bikini wouldn't exactly fly. Some may say I'm deliberately misrepresenting V's argument, but it's an argument that comes from a lack of understanding of what he's even talking about and a lack of caring about what he's even complaining on behalf of. Therefore, you can forgive me for a little bit of exaggeration to prove my point. There is also the case of the subreddit r/Ruby Critics. Full disclosure, while I have not seen all of the series RWBY at the time of writing and at the time of recording, I am aware of the legitimate criticisms around the series and its later seasons, and even share some of those criticisms of my own. However, a lot of the time this subreddit goes a step beyond, to the point where you wonder if they're critics or just looking to A-log. It gets so bad that there are literal posts going after the series for its very first few seasons, which people agree are good, having a high school setting in Beacon Academy, something the fans wish stayed in later arcs, that Ruby Rose, the main heroine, should be the daughter of another character named Crow Branwen instead, even though that it wouldn't make sense outside of the aesthetics. There's even one post which criticized the character of Yang Xiaolong's outfit from the second major story arc, which most of the comments came down to criticism being it sucks or I don't like it, without any substantial criticisms on why it doesn't look good. This is what I mean when I say these days criticism is no more than a shield for those looking to nitpick, hate, and A-log for the sake of just being assholes. It's what fuels people like Razor Fist or Movie Bob, who conveniently are never seen in the same room at the same time. This habit is so bad it can also be used as a shield against legitimate criticisms as well. When you have to wade through a sea of dog shit opinions and mindless vitriol, you tend to miss the legitimate criticisms and actual constructive feedback. Or you can be more malicious and use said vitriol as a shield against criticisms against you to begin with. The sad truth is the internet has brought this upon themselves. Were it not for Red Letter Media's response to the prequel trilogy, of which criticisms were largely just nitpicks with no constructive merit, then people wouldn't have been so knee-jerk defensive of the sequel trilogy, which actually had huge problems with its story, lore, and characters. And now the cycle repeats itself with those critical of the sequels, such as EFAP, dismissing every piece of Star Wars media without giving it a chance. Sure, they claim they're watching the series they're critiquing, but when you see them on their watch streams, they're talking over crucial details that are used as criticisms later because the show never brought it up. And when they do like something that has objective flaws, such as The Last of Us HBO, the God of War PS4 duology, Star Wars Andor, they take the criticisms against those products and treat them as subjective opinion at best, or at worst, examples of racism and sexism. Funny, that sounds familiar, doesn't it? The biggest problem with these sorts of self-proclaimed critics, like Ben Shapiro, like Moeller and Rags, like Razorfist, like Ruby critics, and so on, is they believe their opinion is an objective fact and completely infallible, and anything to the contrary is either to be written off as fanboy defenses or blatant stupidity. And the problem is, they are almost always wrong. The people who take these sort of attitudes are not creatives, nor are they even critics. They're just petty narcissists who believe their opinion is worth far more than it actually is, and are either unaware or in complete denial of how worthless they and their opinions actually are. They are capable of using big words, talking louder and faster and over their opponents, either alone or using dogpiling tactics, but none of that makes them correct. They act like self-appointed judges in a court that doesn't actually exist and use their subjective opinions as a rule of law. And a lot of the time, it's against works they not only didn't have an interest in to begin with, but would have never had any interest in at all. This is like a spoiled child taking their ball and going home, except it isn't their ball and they seek to destroy it so nobody else can enjoy it whatsoever. Because how dare people like Metal Gear, The Witcher, and Japanese media instead of the things that Razorfist likes. But the worst part about these critics is they either by accident or design end up in echo chambers that just feed into their delusions. George R.R. Martin, who was critical of J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, surrounds himself with a clique of far-left writers who shallowly slurp his taint while saying he can do no wrong, provided he keeps saying all the right things in regards to politics. Razorfist actively bans anyone who's even remotely critical of him or his opinions, especially when they can prove him wrong. And R Ruby Critics is a subreddit. That's enough to be said to know that it's an echo chamber. People think being a critic just means being a Simon Cowell-esque asshole to everything that's presented in front of you. This is a mentality that's been fostered by, well, the negativity of the 2000s and 2010s in regard to this kind of criticism becoming popular, as well as cultural atomization followed by the social media echo chamberization of people as a whole. The truth is, though, being a critic means much more than that.
In many ways, the work of a critic is easy. We risk very little, yet enjoy a position over those who offer up their work and their selves to our judgment. We thrive on negative criticism, which is fun to write and to read. But the bitter truth we critics must face is that in the grand scheme of things, the average piece of junk is probably more meaningful than our criticism designating it so. But there are times when a critic truly risks something, and that is in the discovery and defense of the new. The world is often unkind to new talent, new creations. The new needs friends. Last night I experienced something new. An extraordinary meal from a singularly unexpected source. To say that both the meal and its maker have challenged my preconceptions about fine cooking is a gross understatement. They have rocked me to my core. In the past, I have made no secret of my disdain for Chef Gusteau's famous motto, "Anyone can cook." But I realize only now do I truly understand what he meant. Not everyone can become a great artist. But a great artist can come from anywhere. It is difficult to imagine more humble origins than those of the genius now cooking at Gusteau's, who is, in this critic's opinion, nothing less than the finest chef in France. I will be returning to Gusteau soon, hungry for more.
I may have used this clip before in another video, which one I cannot honestly remember, but it bears to be repeated as it highlights what a critic should strive to be instead of just being a snarky A-logger picking on everything. When you close yourself off from the possibility that you might be wrong or something that people like being something that is good, then you cannot rightfully call yourself a critic. People have different tastes and different opinions on art and media, and that is perfectly okay. Does this mean that there's no room for criticism at all? Not at all. It only means that criticism should come from a place seeking to genuinely improve a work rather than just to tear it down. As we covered in our deconstruction video, this kind of criticism is just that, deconstruction that hinges into mere destruction with no intent to build up afterwards. And if you are a creative or a fan of a work and you see this kind of criticism, the only right thing to do is to ignore it. It's not coming from a place of good intent and only wishes to drag you down into the misery mire. Do not excuse criticism from those who are capable of telling you about something that is or is not wrong with a work, but do not take to heart those who only wish to destroy you or what you love. Only in that way will things ever begin to truly improve. Until that day comes, this has been the Koopa Man. If you like this video, please leave a like and subscribe as it really helps my channel. If you have examples of critic culture just being a deconstructive mess, feel free to discuss it in the comments as I'd love to hear examples that I've missed. And, until next time, game on.